moving on, David. On Wednesday, you broke the story about Manchester United being the preferred destination of Mason Mount if he leaves Chelsea. How likely do you feel this is to happen? And who else could be in the frame, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's right, Darren. My understanding is that Mason Mount is leaning towards joining Manchester United if Chelsea agree to sell him, and that talks are expected between the clubs in due course. Of course, they met at Old Trafford on Thursday night, so there may have been some dialogue between the hierarchies of both clubs on that occasion. We'll see if that materialises into offers and deep negotiations. Chelsea, of course, have had a problem over his contract, which expires next summer. They failed to reach an agreement for whatever reason. He's one of the lowest paid players at Stamford Bridge. They decided to park those talks until the end of the season. So the conversations will be picked up, no doubt. But a lot of water has gone under that bridge, excuse the pun. And so there'll be questions about whether Chelsea are going to manage to get this back on track. They won't let him go into the last year of his contract. So it's going to be sign a new deal or sell him, which is pretty stark for an academy player who is Chelsea through and through by all accounts. And I think his ideal scenario would have been to spend longer there. But it seems increasingly likely that he could be leaving. Liverpool were the early front runners, but of course they're not going to be in the Champions League next season. Manchester United have always been there with strong interest. Arsenal too would like to bring him to their club. But it's Manchester United who have really stepped forward as far as I know. Nothing is done or finalised at this stage, but I think that's the direction of travel. And those other clubs, including Liverpool, Arsenal, Thomas Tuchel on behalf of Bayern Munich, who has a credible interest as well, have been made aware that Manchester United is Mount's preference. So it now remains to be seen if they can strike a deal club to club. That's a stumbling block. Manchester United's ownership situation remains unclear. They also have other positions as priorities too, such as centre forward. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens in these weeks ahead. But I think there's a high probability now that Mason Mount will leave Chelsea.
David, you mentioned how Chelsea have sort of let this one drift, and I find their position fascinating. I mean, this is a point where the ownership's relationship with the fans seems to fracture. The honeymoon's over for Todd Boehly and Bedad Eghbali. Do you think they can actually afford to let an academy graduate, fan favourite go, given the politics of the club at the moment?
Well, it's going to be a highly scrutinised decision either way. One thing they can afford is financially. It would be a sort of quite significant moment for them because he represents zero on the balance sheet, like all homegrown academy talents and products. And so a sale would bring them huge profit. They want £70 million for him. Let's see where it ends up if he's sold. The feeling around Manchester United is that a compromise may be reached at 55, I think, was reported by Sammy Mokbel in the Daily Mail. I think the desire of the clubs that are interested in him is more like 40, 45. So perhaps 50, 55 is something of a middle ground where it may end up. And that will really help Chelsea, who have financial fair play challenges with June 30th, the cut-off. That's hurtling into sight. So we're going to see a lot of departures from Chelsea. And clearly, with the academy products, Johnny being able to raise most revenue for Chelsea, and we might look at the likes of Conor Gallagher, Trevor Chalobah, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and others, there may be a lack of sentiment there and more a business approach taken to this for the Chelsea ownership, which will put them on a tricky ground with the fan base. But I think the results will dictate how they're viewed. They're a year into their ownership now. That anniversary has just passed. It's obviously been pretty controversial, tumultuous too, with changes of managers. If Mauricio Pochettino had started this season, they would have had 5 different faces in the dugout, which is extraordinary even by Chelsea's historic standards. And so this is a key appointment of Pochettino. And I think that and how they do in the transfer market and how they start next season will be the true bearing, as opposed to whether academy graduates stay or go. It will be tough for many fans to stomach. But if they manage to get, Pochettino in and things moving in the right direction again, some really good players added, some players that are perhaps surplus to requirements out, slim that squad down with no European football, and really start getting this project on track, then I think their popularity will grow. That they are hardworking, the ownership, they are rolling their sleeves up and trying to get things done. You can argue about whether they've done it well and whether it should have been them doing it. They've now got sporting directors in place. There's been so much change behind the scenes after their takeover. And if they don't get this right, then of course the eyes are going to turn on them in a stronger way than we've seen in this past year. But I do think they've still got a bit of credit in the bank, however thin that is in the eyes of many.
Let's just stick with the theme of transfer then, because we know that Harry Kane is Manchester United's #1 transfer target. If it happens, would it be better for everyone if the deal is done early, or do you expect him to stay?
And then your first point, Vicky, is an idealistic view for many involved, but I don't think it's realistic because Daniel Levy, Tottenham's chairman, does not want to sell Harry Kane. We've seen that historically, and we've been given no reason to believe it's changed. Their priority is to try and sign him to a new contract. Some initial dialogue had taken place when Fabio Paratici was still there as technical director. I think managing director of football is his title. Him leaving means that those talks, to my knowledge, have not continued or picked up or gathered pace in any way, shape or form. They want to get this season out of the way. They need to appoint a new head coach and a replacement for Paratici. And then Harry Kane is obviously representing Tottenham's biggest asset, their best player, their top goal scorer, their talismanic leader, even though he doesn't have the armband. And so Daniel Levy knows that it's near impossible to replace